Welcome to Sumita Roy's English classroom. Since many of you have commented that it would help you to have PowerPoint in grammar lessons, I'm trying to give you both the video and the PowerPoint of the same lessons. You have already seen the active and passive voice in the video form. Now you can see it in the PowerPoint form, and maybe that will help you a lot to improve your ability to change active sentences into passive and passive sentences into active. Today the slides are, first we see how the active verb in the 12 forms of the tenses have passive forms. Which of them can have the passive form and which cannot. Then you have to also see how the structure of the active sentence changes so that it becomes passive. That is the changing of the subject and object position. Also, the use of preposition by. When we make the passive sentence, we require a preposition, and that is the preposition by. So that too we shall talk about in these slides. First, let us begin with the definition. A sentence is in an active voice when the subject of the sentence does the action of the verb. The sentence is considered to be a passive voice when the subject of the sentence does not do the action of the verb. This is the basic rule you have to keep in mind. Also, it is very important for you to remember that only sentences in the active voice which have transitive verb can be changed into the passive voice. If the verb in the sentence is intransitive, then it does not have a passive form. So you must remember that it is essential for you to know whether the verb is active or passive. In order to have the passive form, you have to remember that whether the verb is transitive or intransitive. A transitive verb has a passive form, whereas the intransitive one does not. Let us look at an example of this. There are certain verbs in English which can have both a transitive usage and an intransitive usage. I've given you here a simple verb, study. So I study geography, if you say. Now study here has an object immediately following it. Therefore, study here is transitive. This is the active voice sentence. We can change it into passive voice by saying, geography is studied by me. That is the passive form. But if you say, I study in the evening, here, after the verb study, you don't have a noun. And a transitive verb immediately needs a noun. Here, there is no noun. Instead, there is a preposition, and then the noun comes. So we don't have a direct object. It has no passive form. This example shows you how transitive verb sentences alone can have a passive form. Now let us look at the first change. That is, the 12 tenses which are there in the English active verb do not have passive forms for all of them. The rule for formation of the passive is to be has to be used in the tense form, and the main verb has to be used in the past participle form. So here you have a chart where you have all the 12 divisions, because the active verb is put in all the 12 columns, but the passive is not there in 4 of the columns. You can see in column number 2, continuous, future continuous does not have a passive form. Similarly, all the three perfect continuous forms do not have a passive form. So these four columns you can see is written clearly, no passive form. The remaining all have passive. For instance, study or studies, present simple present tense, has is studied or are studied. The rule is use to be in the tense form and verb in the past participle. Verb past participle is studied and tense is and are. Then simple past, studied, becomes was or were studied. Then future will or shall study becomes will be studied, shall be studied. Present continuous, am, is, or are studying. Then you have is being studied or are being studied. Then you have past continuous, was or were studying becomes was being studied and were being studied. Future will or shall be studying becomes, it doesn't have any passive form as I told you, so it just doesn't change. It remains only in the active form. Now we move to the perfect. All the three perfect tenses have the passive form. Has or have studied becomes has been or have been studied. Had studied becomes had been studied. Remember the rule, the tense is to be. So perfect tense is has, past participle of be is been, and then again past participle of the main verb. Similarly, had, past tense, been, past participle of to be, and then the past participle of the main verb. So had studied, had been studied. Will or shall have studied, will or shall have been studied. These are the forms for the passive. So this is the first rule, saying that all transitive verbs which have these tense forms can form passive, but only perfect continuous cannot form passive, and future continuous also does not have a passive form. We saw the first rule where from active verb you have to change the verb to passive. Now this slide shows you rule number 2. That is, the subject and object have to change position and the preposition by has to be used. So you have the active sentence, I eat rice. I is the subject of the sentence. Eat is a transitive verb in the simple present tense, and rice is the object. So passive, object becomes subject. So first we write rice. Now eat, which is an active verb, has to be transferred into the passive form. So we say to be has to be used. To be in the simple present form is, because rice is a singular verb, a noun, we use the singular form. So is. Eat, past participle is eaten. So the verb becomes rice is eaten. Now subject has to become object. In the pronoun video, you will find how I for subject, the form is me for object. So we say me, but me cannot be added to a, a passive verb because all passive verbs are intransitive. Therefore, we require a preposition. And the preposition, as I mentioned in the rule itself, is by. So we say, rice is eaten by me. Now you have the explanation clearly given to you that rice is the object which becomes subject and so on. So these explanations you can read for yourself. I have explained it clearly, and now let us go on to the next slide. Here are 4 slides now, one after the other, with examples of transferring from active to passive, 1 or 2 sentences from passive to active also to give you an idea. You must remember that we have to first talk about the different verb forms. In the earlier slide, we have seen eats. I eat rice. That is simple present form. Now, if you have present continuous, then we say, we are eating rice. Now, we here is the subject, so it has to become object. We in object is us. Again, go back to the video on pronouns, you will know this. Us cannot be put in the sentence, so we add it by using the preposition by. Now, rice comes to the front of the sentence, object becomes subject. Is eating, present continuous, is being eaten. That is the present continuous form. Is being is the to be form. Eaten is the past participle of eat. Students take examinations. Now, examinations is the object, so it becomes the subject. Examinations are taken. Now, take is simple present tense. Are taken, because examinations is the plural form, are is used. By students. Students was subject, so use by to add students. You can have this in singular. Somebody asked this question in the live chat for the video on active and passive. A student takes an examination. Suppose both are singular. A student takes an examination. I have done nothing to the sentence except make it into singular and provide articles. Already you have articles video which you must have seen. So an examination, object becomes subject. Is taken, is because examination is singular. Instead of are, we use is. Taken by a student. So a student was subject, has become object. Add the object using by, and you have the passive voice sentence. Now we have another example where we are using the simple past. Weavers wove this cloth. So this cloth was woven by weavers. This cloth is the object. It has become the subject. Wove is simple past. Simple past passive form was. Was is the to be past, and wove past participle is woven. By we have to add, and then the subject of the active sentence becomes the object here. So weavers. Weavers has come directly from the there, got added using preposition by. Weavers wove these clothes. Now suppose we don't have this cloth, which is singular, we have plural, these clothes. Then what happens? These clothes were woven. Was for cloth, singular was. Clothes, plural, were. Were woven by weavers remains the same. Weavers have woven this cloth. Now what have we got here? This is the present perfect tense. We did the past tense, now we are talking about present perfect tense. So weavers have woven this cloth. So this cloth has been woven by weavers. Have woven, present perfect, passive form, has been woven. Why do we use has? Because cloth is singular. Weavers is plural, so we used have. Cloth is singular, so we use has been woven. And by weavers, weavers subject becomes object using the preposition. Now we come to the plural form. Weavers have woven these clothes. So these clothes have been woven, not has anymore, because clothes is plural, have been woven by weavers. Now look at the first sentence in this slide. It is a passive voice sentence. My pen was stolen. My pen is the subject. Was stolen is the simple past passive form of the verb steal. There is no object here. The reason is because the object is not a clear object. either the noun or pronoun which is to be used here is not specific. So since we are not planning to put any specific noun here, we have to just leave it. We don't know who has stolen. So in the active sentence, what happens is you use a pronoun which is an indefinite pronoun. Then you say someone stole. Was stolen, you change it in the opposite direction from what we are doing. Was stolen is the passive form. Now stole is the active form. My pen is the subject here, it becomes object. Object is not there in the passive sentence, so we add an object, someone, and make it the subject of the active sentence. So you say, someone stole my pen. Next, we come to the future, simple future form of the verb. They will choose the best gift. They, subject, will choose is the simple future form. The best gift is the object. Now the best gift becomes the subject in the passive sentence. Will choose becomes will be chosen. Choose, past participle, chosen. Will be is the future form. By is used to add, and they, subject, becomes them. Again, go back to the pronouns video, you will find that in subject form, if we use they, in the object we have to use them. So the best gift will be chosen by them. The school has collected the fee. The fee is the object, so we make it the fee, subject. Had collected, this is the past perfect form. You see how we are doing all the tenses. We did present perfect, we did simple tenses, now we come to past perfect. The school had collected the fee. The fee had been collected. Had collected becomes had been collected by the school. That is, by we use, and the subject school becomes the object. He was painting the house. This is the past continuous form. He was painting the house. The house becomes the subject. The house was painting becomes was being painted. That is the past continuous form, passive. Painted is the past participle. He becomes him. So by him, the house was being painted by him. Very often, sentences have the modal auxiliary in their verb structure. The modal auxiliary form also can be made into the passive if the main verb is transitive. Always remember that the main verb, the lexical verb, should be transitive. Then any additional modal, any additional helping verb does not really matter. It can have the passive form. Here you have, I can write a letter. Can write is the modal usage, can, and then main verb write. Now the right form is the basic infinitive, the bare infinitive, the root form without to. So when we change it, we must remember that we have to use the form be, or we have to use the form, any form of to be. That we have to remember. So a letter, object, becomes subject, a letter. Can write becomes can be written, write, past participle, written. By me, I becomes me, already we know, and by is used for adding it. You must pay the fine. Here you have the fine, which is the object, becomes subject, the fine. Now must pay is the verb, using the modal form must and the main verb pay. So we have to say must be. must be form has to be used. And then paid. Pay becomes paid. That is the past participle form. So the fine must be paid by you. Or if you don't feel like saying by you, you can also say the fine must be paid, because you're talking to this person. The you is implied. You are talking to one who is the second person standing in front of you. So using the word by you is not necessary. It can be done away with. You say the fine must be paid, meaning that you have to pay the fine. The school has collected the fee. Now the fee is the subject because it was the object in the active sentence. Then you say the fee had collected past, uh, it is the past perfect form in the active voice, has this past perfect, had been collected. Had been is the form which is used, and then here you have uh, collected. By the school, by we use and then the school is added. This presentation will be made by me. So we have this is the passive form, not the active form. I will make, me becomes I, by is removed because we don't need it. Will be made becomes will make, and this presentation becomes the object. So this presentation will be made by me, which is the passive form, becomes I will make this presentation, which is the active form. Then you have an example, I like apples. This is better way of saying than passive, because very often we don't use passive, especially in our informal conversation. Very formally, when we are speaking, maybe sometimes the passive is allowed. When you're writing, passive is also used, but the preference is always for active. So apples are liked by me. That is, grammatically that's how it is done. But I don't think anybody while speaking will say apples are liked by me. They would prefer to say I like apples. So you can see how these examples all help you to learn the active form, to learn how to change the active form into the passive form, so that if you require at any point of time, you can use them. Otherwise, in your conversation, etc., continue to use the active form. That is the most accepted form. Please watch the video which has the same examples and the same explanation. Here is the PowerPoint form of the same lesson on active and passive voice. By watching both of them, you can become better and you will get a lot of practice. So do all these things. Thank you and all the best.